I cut back on work to prove my wife a point. There was a time in my life when I was completely consumed by work. Day and night, my mind was fixated on deadlines, meetings, and targets. I thought that by dedicating more hours to my job, I was securing a better future for my family. I convinced myself that it was all for them. But in reality, I was drifting further away from the very people I was supposedly working for. My wife had been telling me for months, no years, that I was missing out on important moments. "You're not present," she'd say. "You may be here physically, but your mind is always somewhere else." I brushed it off. I thought she didn't understand the pressures I was under, the expectations I had to meet. But deep down, her words lingered. One evening, she said something that shook me. "Our son hardly knows you. He asked me why you don't play with him like other dads do." That hit me hard. I realized I couldn't recall the last time I sat down and really spent time with our son. My endless pursuit of career success was costing me my relationship with my family. That night, I decided to do something drastic. I cut back on my work hours, something I had never imagined doing. At first, it felt wrong. I was used to being in control, always on top of things. I thought my career would crumble if I didn't give it my all. But I did it to prove a point to myself and to my wife that family should come first. The first week was tough. I felt restless, constantly checking my phone for emails and updates. But as the days passed, something changed. I started noticing the little things I had been missing. My son's laughter, my wife's smile, the peace of just sitting together as a family. It was like rediscovering a part of my life that I had forgotten existed. I realized that the more I stepped away from work, the more I was stepping into my family's life. I started helping my son with his homework, playing soccer with him in the yard. I began to see the joy in his eyes when I was around, really around. My wife, too, seemed happier. She no longer had to ask me to be present because I was already there, mentally and emotionally. But the real test came when things at work began to pile up. My inbox was flooded with emails, and I could feel the pressure mounting again. I had to make a choice: dive back into work or maintain the balance I had started to build. It wasn't easy, but I chose my family. What surprised me the most was that despite working fewer hours, I was still able to get things done. My productivity didn't suffer. In fact, I became more efficient because I was more focused during the hours I did work. And the best part? I was happier, more at peace. I no longer felt the constant guilt of neglecting my family. In the end, I didn't just prove a point to my wife. I proved it to myself. Life isn't just about work or success. It's about the relationships we build, the memories we create, and the love we share. Cutting back on work wasn't a loss. It was a gain in time, in connection, and in understanding what truly matters. So, if you ever find yourself caught up in the race for success, remember this: work will always be there, but the moments with your loved ones, those are fleeting. Don't wait until it's too late to realize what's truly important. There was a phase in my life when everything revolved around work. I was constantly chasing meetings, deadlines, and targets. I believed that the harder I worked, the better life I could provide for my family. I kept telling myself that this sacrifice was for them. But in reality, I was distancing myself from the very people I claimed to be working for. My wife had been trying to get through to me for a long time. She would say, "You're here, but not really here. You're physically present, but mentally, you're always elsewhere." I dismissed her concerns, thinking she didn't understand the kind of pressure I was under. I thought she couldn't possibly know what it takes to make a career work in such a competitive world. But, in truth, her words hit deeper than I wanted to admit. Then, one evening, she said something that stopped me in my tracks. She said, "Our son doesn't know you. He asks why you don't spend time with him like the other dads do." Those words echoed in my mind. I stood there, trying to remember the last time I had really spent time with our son, and I couldn't. My entire focus was on work, and I was missing out on moments that I could never get back. That night, I made a decision that felt almost impossible. I decided to cut back on my work hours. I needed to prove something to my wife, but more importantly, I needed to prove it to myself. I had to show that family comes first. Initially, the decision didn't sit well with me. For years, I had been conditioned to believe that working long hours was the only way to succeed. What if my career suffered? What if I couldn't keep up? These fears kept creeping in, but I knew I had to make this change.